everyone to Niku, and I like to give also my gratitude to those who organized these wonderful events and the sponsors who did not want their name to be mentioned. And I would like also to thank everyone who came in this snowy weather to this audience. Well, I'm not going to repeat what I've said in my book because you are going to have a chance to see that. I decided it's best probably to concentrate on my recollection from my childhood onwards. As I was a child of 4, 5, or 6 years old, I remember having seen the picture of فرنگی woman in our living room. And I was fascinated to see this nicely framed and hanged on the living room. I mean, their living room those days was not like today. It was opened only on Nowruz time and only for distinguished guests and particular people. And so whenever we had a chance to go and see that living room, I stared at these pictures. They were different than other women I had known in their relatives and families. I also remember when I went to barbershop, there were also some picture of Faragi woman framed, and they were placed on the side of the mirror symmetrically. And these weren't the only cases, but in many houses, bazaar shops, everywhere, Iranian had appreciated and praised the picture of Faragi women and placed them in their houses and everywhere. And the reason I'm saying Faranghi is that's the way we call European Faranghi. The word Farang is derived from France, and for the first time Iranian met French people in 17th century, and they called them Faranghi, or people from France. So therefore, in Iran, the word Faranghi is very common. Another memory that is very dear to me was an album in our living room, and this album was only access to special guests. This album was filled with postcards from Europe and from everywhere, from scenery from the buildings and the people and women in public, women walking with men, and I mean, all the things that nowadays is prevalent to everyone and is known. But those days, of course, this was like rarities. And it was the story of people who had gone to Europe and had seen these scenes. It was like the most interesting stories to tell the guests that how women behaved in Europe and walked in public with bare head and, nicely made up and walked among with their man and so forth and shared their public and social life. At the end of the 19th century, the number of Iranians going to Europe was increased very much. And there were students, they were sent to Europe to study, they were tradesmen, they were businessmen, and they were diplomats for the first time. There were this kind of a diplomatic relationship between European countries and Iran. And with this Iranian return from Europe, one of their gifts and one of the presents that they brought to other Iranians was really the postcard and posters of the Faranghi scenes. And these were praised and was framed and was hanged in their shops in the living room and elsewhere. My acquaintance, besides childhood, go back to years ago when I was researching after the revolution. Besides, I couldn't continue my work because right after the revolution, the war broke out in Iran. There was no gas, no gasoline, no power, and I had to suspend the studio, and I decided to go and get to know my country better. And I made a lot of field trips. And along this field trip, which I ran into many crafts, discovered many crafts and many items that they were very unknown to me. I also entered some of the noble houses, aristocratic houses with the picture of the painting on the walls and on the ceiling, and some of them attracted me so much I decided why should this be hidden and not known to other people in the world. And I decided to take note, and so my studies for this book go back to 3 decades ago, but the main job was done during the last 20 years, where I was very afraid that this house is going to break down and the house is going to go to demolish because of some of the nudities that there were in houses. And you know, in Iran there are some radical clerics that if they make an order, given fatwa, and these houses will be very much on risk. And then I decided to really document them seriously and make it in this book. And I'm very happy I did it. I mean, the houses that these people live in, the owners, they love them and they praise them, and they do not want any stranger who can cause any problem in. But since they knew about my intention, they let me in and they welcome me and they collaborate me and they let my photographers come in and to work with it. And but the love of Iranian for Faranghi women goes back to long time ago, at least to 16th and 17th centuries, because Iranian women they were not seen in public, and they were so much covered that hardly you could see it. You can only see your mother and your sisters probably at home, not really anyone else. And so when this picture appeared, this prints appeared after the invention of the lithography in Europe at the end of 19th century, at the beginning of the 19th century, and the printmaking. So this was the number of this print poured in Iran a lot more than before, and anybody went to Europe brought these prints to Iran. And those who didn't have access to painters in the villages and among the tribes, they had this enlarged in carpets. I mean, that is a very good example of the Faranghi woman on a carpet. It's made at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, by a chieftain of the Bakhtiyari tribes. And this was definitely, in my book, I showed them even the postcard. I got hold of the postcard, which was a French woman in different position. And he was so fascinated by this woman, and he made several ordered his weavers to make carpets out of them. And his name appears on top of this, and is even dated. And so, but in the cities, when they had access to painters, there was easier to get hold of painters and to have their houses with the image of Faranghi woman decorated. And this figure of the Faranghi woman were among the other traditional floral drawings, and appeared in a smaller scales until the appearance of the prints. When the prints came to Iran, this was of course cheap prints, and so everybody had access to bring it to Iran. But look what they have done with the cheap prints, the collaboration of several guilds to make such a cheap print into valuable artwork is amazing. And as my daughter mentioned, it's like marrying East and West together, bringing something from the West and combining it with the Persian material. All kind of guilds and craftsmen collaborated. It was a collective job under the supervision of Memar, which is their traditional architect. And there was a stock of workers, there were mirror cutters, there were mosaic makers, there were painters, and of course, the owner also had some taste. And to me, the reason I was so fascinated by these houses and by these rooms, it was because to me, it was like contemporary art, was like conceptual art, you know? Some of the artists, Western artists, who make collage and assemblage out of cheap newspapers and cheap photography, and make it into a valuable painting or artwork. And this was done in middle of 19th century, over 150 years ago, by some Iranian in Isfahan, in a smaller town even, not only in Tehran and Isfahan and Shiraz, but even in a smaller town, who the man of statue and some wealth, or anytime they built a house, they wanted, they designated the room to the mirror room. They call it mirror room. And in this mirror room, there were definitely some picture of the European woman combined with the rest of the crafts there. My fascination to discover this art inspired me a lot in my artwork too. And I have produced some artwork, not exactly like this, but differently, but it was the inspiration or the sparkle came from the artwork, the فرنگی woman. I mean, the reason we call it Faranghi is Faranghi, Persian the language, in Parsi language, first of all, it has a different connotation. It alleviates the meaning of the word higher than ordinary. Anything is suffixed with Faranghi, that means is a little bit better than ordinary one. Havij Faranghi, for instance, is compared to, Havij Faranghi means carrots, European carrots. Compared to Iranian carrots, it's more rosy, more reddish. And of course, some of the fruits which at the time they came, they were imported to Iran. We didn't have any name, but they were good looking, like a strawberry. We call it Tut Faranghi, which has nothing to do with the mulberry. Mulberry, Tut Faranghi means mulberry, European mulberry, but anyway, mulberry is from the trees and Tut Faranghi, and strawberry is from bushes. But this is the way Iranian praised the Faranghi. And this was not only about the fruits and vegetables, which you can, Iranian who are here, they can count, not lots of names that they are suffixed with Faranghi. But it also in other guilds too. For instance, the carpenter who works makes furniture, makes chairs and tables and cupboards, and that's called Najjar Faranghi Kar. That means Faranghi, European maker carpenter. And it's praised and more expensive and it's more, let's say, more respected than ordinary carpenter who makes only doors and windows. It was also true in art, from the mid-19th century when Iranian kings and courtiers sent their painters to Europe to learn Western art, classical art, because they were fascinated when they visited Europe, when they fascinated the European painting of the Shah, of the kings, European kings and cardinals and so forth, with so much similarities, and they wanted the same thing in Iran, and so they sent their painters, their court painters to Europe, especially to France, to Paris, to Florence, and to Rome. And they returned, of course, they learned this, and they were called Faranghi Kar. That means they were painters their work was based on European or classical art. And they knew how to make landscape, how to make portraits, how to make buildings and still life and so forth. And this is in opposed to Iranian traditional painters, which the painting were based on Persian miniature, continuation of Persian miniature. Anyway, one more thing I wanted to tell you, we don't call all foreigners Faranghi. We call Indian, we call Chinese, African, but I don't know why we call all European Faranghi. No matter from Romania to, I don't know, to Scotland, they are all Faranghi to us and they're all the same because of their complexion, because of their good looks and their hairdo and all of that. If you have any question, I'm here. Yes, please.
So in part of the video that we were watching, there was that religious figure. I'm curious, like what, it sounded like you were having a conversation with them.
Yes, that man is exceptional. He's a collector also. He's a very young cleric and exceptional. And I met him some time ago. And anytime I go to Isfahan, I go to visit him because he loves artworks and he collects them. And he's a man of wealth. He is a man of great roots. His family go back to 17th century. They all were the Imam Jum'eh, the Friday Imams of Isfahan before the revolution. They are not political. This man is not political either, but his cleric is were discussed. But anyway, I am very happy that he now owns that house. That house belonged to Zellul Sultan, the senior son of Nasruddin Shah, and during the Iran-Iraq war, it was given to the escapees of the war from everywhere, and a lot of damages. He went through a lot of damages, and this man repaired them all. He has the means of repairing and taking good care of the house, and the house is in such a good condition. Not only him, but whoever has one of his houses, I noticed that they take good care of it. And I was very happy to see that. Oh yes. The house of Shah Shahani, they have lived in 3 generations, they have lived there. The house that I was shown at last, it's a very small house, but very exquisite. It's like a little museum, really. It's like a piece of art by itself. But this house with the mullah, with the cleric, this house is only belonged to rich men in 19th century, and then of course it was sold one to another, and then at last he bought it. But this was not this kind of houses were not only in Isfahan, were everywhere in Iran. They were in Shiraz. I show some of the houses in Shiraz in the book. They were in Azerbaijan, and they were, in many major cities. But they were not open to everyone. They were kind of closed and open to special people who appreciate and who like them because of this painting, because of the subject matter. Yes, please.
So, as a Farandi, I can tell you that I would rather own a Persian miniature than a classical Farandi painting.
Oh, because you are a great painter. You are a Farngi painter. I mean, okay. Okay, novelty is always appreciated in anywhere it goes, especially in Iran. The Iranian, they go crazy about new things, and they give up their traditional things, but even if they are beautiful and even they are nice, and they give them up and for something new, and that's bad actually. I don't approve of that, but that's the way it used to be. And when Iranian returned from Europe, Iranian were eating on the floor around the spread, which called sofre. These sofres were beautiful needleworks and printed cotton cloths, kalamkar, and all kind of work, nice work. And they had beautiful vessels, implements for this. Imagine eating, but they gave it up completely, and they sold it at the door to peddlers. I mean, for nothing, and they just prefer to go on the chairs and tables, and so hardly they remember what they had in common. Yes. David. Yes.
Building
mentioned everything, but you didn't mention I'm also a husband. So that also takes a lot of time. Anyway, I mean, we don't realize how much time we have. We really don't realize until we have project. And once we have project, then we can feed one after another. And that's the way it has been with me. When you don't have any project, it's like, you know, you are busy and you don't have any time to accept anything or see anybody, you know. But when you have project, it's different. And then you manage to make it. And I have always enjoyed working on different fields. And if I get tired of working in the studio in my sculpture, which is rather physical and hard work, the best thing for me go to sit behind my desk and write something or read something or listen to a piece of music or something. Anyway, or make a salad for my wife. Anyway, I don't think I have made that, I haven't produced that much. I think because I am behind, I always have a lot more to do. I plan a lot more. Every day I get up, I want to do 10 things, and at the end of the night, I have done only 2 of them, and the other 8 remains for the day after and the day after. Iran is a rich country with great heritages and undiscovered. Believe me, Iran, not very many of the Iranian cultural, either art or either literature or other architecture, whatever, they are not discovered, they are not known. And I feel if I do very little, I cannot do them all, but I feel if I don't do it, who is going to do it? If I don't go after this pictorial carpet made by the villagers and by the tribesmen, they were about the case of destructions, and they were disliked. No Iranian liked them. Nobody wanted them. They were out of the fashion. And I mean, when I started to collect them 40 years ago, I managed to buy them very cheap for practically nothing. And I'm very happy I did it. And then I wrote books about them. And then one project brings another. When when a door is open to you, then when you enter and you find, oh my goodness, there are other doors that you have to either enter or you just have to go back. Yes?
What was the idea of putting all those pictures on the ceiling of these houses, and whether they were thinking of looking up above, or how do they thought of it?
Very good question. You know, Iranians did not never leave a ceiling bare, because ceiling was like sky, like paradise. And up there, they always thought up there, high up, there is another life. And so they made it a lot more livelier than just bare ceiling. I'm not talking about villagers who couldn't afford anything, but I'm talking about the aristocrats who had means of doing all of this, because it's very expensive. And they hired painters to do this, either in stucco work, plaster work, or painting, and at least since 16th century.
Was there any deviation from the original postcards or paintings of European women?
Sorry, can you repeat it?
Were there any, in your book, were there any deviation from the fashion design employed by postcard or pictures of the European women in these pictures that they were copied? Were there variation of?
Yes, you will see some of the examples. I mean, you will see examples of postcard models, and then, of course, the work of the mid-19th century French painter, which Iranians loved it. I mean, most of these young girls were depicted by some French painter of the mid-19th century, which I had a hard time. I spent probably most of the time, probably about 7 or 8 years. I went through many sources, Victoria and Albert Museum, Hermitage, and other libraries to find the sources, but then at last I found some of the sources which were from France. Iran was very much in relation, in trade with France up to early 20th century. Yes, some of the base sources appear in my book. Yes, that's the question. Yes.
So they basically copied what they saw. They didn't bring any ideas or imaginations of themselves into what they did.
Well, this novelty or new things on ideas are phenomenon of the 20th century and our time. In the past, it wasn't so. In the past, they were honored if they could do a good copy from their masters and from their generation before. So Iran was like Europe, like everywhere else, and one generation followed the previous generation, son followed the father, and so forth and so on.
Now, last question from here, Nas. A lot of business articles, talking about and I just wanted to
I hardly hear you, sorry.
you read a lot of articles in business reviews about auctions in Iran, contemporary art and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about
About my art, about the auction time.
it talks about your art, it talks about a lot of other very well-known Iranian artists. And I just wanted your comments on the contemporary art market.
Oh my goodness, that's a big subject, and let's leave that for another night, because that, believe me, that takes a long time.
Right. Can you just give us
A little bit, yes. You see, after the revolution, we were close to Western world, and we were really locked in, and people didn't know what's happening in Iran, what's going on in Iran. I mean, it only last 10 years that the Iranian artists are allowed to send out their work, and this can be auctioned abroad and exhibited and so forth. It wasn't so at the beginning. It was very complicated if you wanted to take one of your works out of Iran. Now, of course, the art didn't stop in Iran. The pace of art was even faster, because many youngsters, especially females, they joined the club, they wanted to express themselves, and today, I am not exaggerating if I say we have more female artists than male artists in Iran, at least in big capitals, big cities like Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz, and so forth. And the number of the young artists who move to art, there are also different reasons. There are all the political, financial, economical reason for that. I don't want to get into that, that's a long subject. But anyway, I'm very happy that this happened, and I always promoted them, I backed them up, and either they were my student or they weren't my student, because this is something is flourishing, and the good thing about art is not like writing, it's not in words. You can do your art and express yourself in abstract ways, in symbolic ways, and nobody can follow you, you cannot get into trouble. And so, a lot of these artists have their own ideas. They are, either environmentalists, they are political minded, they have other reasons, and they manage to express themselves very well. And they manage to keep going on. I mean, nobody can stop them. And I think that's also one of the reasons that art is flourishing in Iran after the revolution more than before. Bravo, Tanga.